So today our workshop is going to be on summer maintenance and volunteer management. So welcome to everyone who's joining us today. And Tessa, will you go to the next slide? Great. So I'm joining you here from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And we always welcome you if you wanted to include that in the chat, what territory you're joining us from. And I'm co-hosting today with Tessa. And this is our second workshop together. I'm really happy to be here working together. So Farm to School BC, Tessa, if you'll go to the next one. Farm to School BC kind of works from three areas, thinking about healthy local food, hands-on learning, and school and community connectedness. It's sponsored by the Public Health Association of BC and the Provincial Health Services Authority. So we have hubs in different parts of the province. We're lucky to have one of our animators joining us today. Rowan is here with us, which I'm really excited for. Yeah, and if you could switch to the next slide, Tessa. Thanks. This is our team, so we'll remind you again at the end, but we're always really happy to hear from folks wherever you are. So whether you are in one of those regions or not, we're really happy always to hear from you if you have any questions. So these are the folks that you can reach out to on our website if you do have any questions after the workshop today. Great. And Tessa, will you?
Wonderful.
Great. Thanks, Tessa.
Thanks for the intro.
My first time doing the intro, so thank you all for your patience. So I'm trying to remember all the important parts to say and people to mention. So
that's great. Thanks, Kaylin. So I'm Tessa. I've been with you since January, hosting the School Garden Mentorship Program. We are now on our 5th workshop of this series. And we've come a long way. Back in January, we were talking about garden committees and designing your garden. And today we get to talk about summer and thinking ahead. So I feel like it's very much a shift of the seasons as we're now looking ahead to the summer. For our agenda today, we are fortunate to have 2 guest speakers exploring our topics of volunteer management, volunteer coordination, as well as summer maintenance. So starting off today, we're going to have Vanessa Sparrow give us a bit of an introduction to an amazing school garden program called Land and Learning at School in the Powell River School District. After Vanessa speaks, Kaylin and I will be talking about thinking ahead to the fall, planning for the summer, and coordinating volunteers, looking both at volunteers year-round and building community in your garden, as well as looking specifically at summer volunteers and how can you work with summer volunteers to get through your summer maintenance tasks. And we'll round out the session at the end with Roanne joining us. She is the North Central Farm to School BC Community Animator, and she's going to talk about a unique partnership with Master Gardeners and volunteers to look at how you can use partnerships to help maintain your gardens in the summer. So first up on our agenda, we are really fortunate to have Vanessa Sparrow joining us. I first learned about Vanessa's work and I was just amazed at this really unique school garden program that she's created. And we reached out to her because part of her school garden program is maintaining, coordinating, recruiting, and retaining lots of volunteers to manage the program. And so she has a really interesting perspective on how volunteers can engage with students in the garden. So Vanessa is going to give us a bit of an overview of the Land and Learning at School program in Powell River, as well as some of her perspective and lessons learned on volunteer recruitment, coordination, and retention. So I will stop screen sharing and Vanessa is going to pull up her presentation. So welcome, Vanessa. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Tessa. Hello. Good afternoon. It's really nice to be here. Let me just get this all going. Okay, I just got to get the right view going here. Wrong thing. Okay. Slideshow. There we go. Okay, firstly, let me just start by acknowledging that I am speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Plahaman Nation, and I'm very grateful to be here. And grateful also to Tessa and Kaylin for giving me the opportunity, so thank you very much. Yeah, as Tessa said, hang on a second. Why do I have this thing at the top? Okay. I'm going to be speaking to you a little bit about my program up here in Powell River School District, the Landed Learning at School program, and specifically how we use volunteers to provide hands-on food literacy education to elementary school students here. So firstly, just a little bit of background. Sorry, I'm just trying to set up my screen. I'll get there in a second. I want everyone to, there we go. Okay, so I won't go into this too much. It's a bit of a long story, but in 2018, the district initiated my role, which is food literacy coordinator. It's a part-time role. I'm 25 hours a week, with the aim of supporting the 6 district elementary schools to increase their use of gardens and kitchens as tools for experiential learning. Then in 2019, I began the Landed Learning at School program, and some of you may have actually heard that name before, because the program is actually based on a model that was originally pioneered by the UBC Faculty of Education, and I had been part of that many years ago and was very lucky and able to work with Stacey Friedman, the former manager of that program, to adapt the program with permission from UBC in consultation with her for the needs of our local school district. So it's become its own thing. It's its own creature now, but it has philosophically very much in common with that original model. So we are in our 4th year now. We've been through the COVID thing, and using volunteers in schools in COVID was interesting, but we managed to kind of adapt, and the board has been very supportive, and here we are 4 years later and we're going strong. So there's 2 elements to the program. The full program involves 12 sessions, half-day sessions over the course of a year, involving 12 volunteers usually, and I run that in 1 school per year. Largely because, as I said, it's a part-time position, and it takes a fair amount of work. It's well worth it, the outcome, but it's quite intensive to find the volunteers and set up that many half-day sessions and do the front-end loading for the teacher, et cetera, right? So for now, the full program of 12 sessions is run in 1 school per year, and then so the other 5 schools don't miss out, I run a kind of scaled back version of the program called the Garden-Based Education Package, and that's kind of, generally 6 sessions, sometimes including some farm visits, and I'm able usually to take 1 or 2 of my volunteers with me to those schools. Okay. So the program objectives are to provide school children with the skills and knowledge that they need to make healthy food choices for themselves, their communities, and the environment, which is the definition of food literacy that I'm working with. Secondly, to support schools in using the food gardens and kitchens for experiential and curriculum connected learning, as I mentioned before. And then thirdly, and with the most relevance today, to build strong community school partnerships, especially with local food growers and related community groups. So the landed learning model itself is based on 3 kind of values, philosophical pillars, and you'll see some...
Forgot I had this until right now. This is talking about the landed learning model that Powell River are doing.
Hello, am I missing? Oh, okay, sorry, there was just someone talking. Yeah, so the 3 pillars of the model have a lot of overlap with farm to school. As you can see, we sorry, because I'm a co-host, I'm getting all the admissions as well. Hang on a second. Okay, so experiential learning, environmental stewardship, and intergenerational partnerships form the basis of the landed learning model, and I'll be focusing on intergenerational partnerships today. So in the context of landed learning program, the important things to tell you about intergenerational partnerships are that The program currently has 14 adult volunteers participating. They range at last count from 26 to 72 in age, which is fantastic. And they come from all walks of life, and they're a truly amazing group of people. I'm incredibly lucky to have them. They do change, people come and go, but I have some people who've been with me for 4 years, which is just amazing. I call them garden friends. It's a bit less cumbersome than volunteers, and it also communicates to the students the nature of the relationship. It's important to say that the non-parental, non-teacher relationship that these students have with these adults is really important to their sense of esteem, right? These people are volunteering to come and spend time with them, even though they don't have to. And that has a real impact on students. So those garden friends work in pairs with the same small group of grade 3 to 5, usually, students. And the ratio is 2 adults, as I said, and 3 to 4 children. And that grouping, as much as possible, stays consistent over an entire school year. So there's real richness in that. And that continuity allows the students to form quite close relationships with the garden friends, which in turn, in my observation, really does have impacts on self-esteem and especially a willingness to try new things, which clearly with the nature of this kind of hands-on learning that we're doing is extremely important. That extra confidence to get hands in the soil or deal with critter fears or try new foods or whatever it is the gateway to the impact that this kind of programming has. So the garden friends bring skills and knowledge from the community, as you can imagine, into each school, which is obviously enriching for students and staff, but it also adds to the general culture of the school. I have some volunteers who form ongoing relationships with the schools that we work in and continue to help out in the garden. Or right now I have one volunteer who's a plumber who has offered free of charge to install an outdoor sink in a garden at one of the schools for washing vegetables. So those kinds of things really create those strong linkages. And then it's important to say that hopefully the experience is fun, educational and rewarding for the garden friends, as well as the students and the teacher. Okay, so in terms of my management and what I need to do to incorporate those volunteers, there's really 3 elements: recruitment, orientation, and retention, which are all kind of clinical words. So I kind of renaming them here: finding people, making sure that those people are comfortable, and then keeping them comfortable. So recruitment is pretty self-explanatory. I just thought I would kind of just go over quickly the kinds of places that I have found people. A lot of people have come through personal networks because I worked as a food security coordinator in this region for some time. So I had a lot of existing relationships with food growing community, and many people have kind of come to me that way. But far from all, many people have come from talks that I've given at the Garden Club, to the Rotary Club, some from PACs, although less parents than you might imagine. I guess parents are required to do many other things for schools. But the Garden Club have been a really rich source of people. Word of mouth, it's a small town. I wanted to just include that because in terms of trying to recreate this elsewhere, I think there are specifics to doing this in a smaller place. And yeah, that word of mouth is probably one of them. People hear about it, they get excited because their friends doing it, et cetera, et cetera. Plus, you know, there's 6 schools in the region, and apart from Texada, there's never very far to really get to any of them, which, you know, makes a big difference if you're not crossing town, you know, once a month kind of thing, or crossing a city. I do have a Facebook page. I'm currently not using it. I will get it going again. Local media is still a very alive and thriving form of communication in this town. And you can see here one of my former students, Katie, proudly showing off her cucumber seedlings. That was a front page article. It generated lots of interest. And then sometimes I go old school and put up flyers in shopping centres. So orientation. Before the actual formal orientation in September, I like to host a meet and greet lunch in late summer in August. I usually cater it if I have the time. I'll do a bunch of sandwiches, soups, cakes, whatever. And then I have invite teachers, school staff, anyone who's registered an interest, anyone and everyone to come and meet in an informal setting at the school garden that we'll be working in, and just have a chance to speak to each other, to speak to me, ask questions, get a feeling for what it is we're trying to do, and if that's a fit for that person. And then once that happens, I have a formal half-day orientation session once school starts. It's important that we're able to go into the school facility and see the kitchen and the garden and meet the teacher and the principal. And then we go over the kinds of things you would imagine during that half day. A lot of our time is spent working through kind of potential scenarios that people are interested in, how they would manage that in terms of kids and including them and so on. We go through some sample activities. We have a safety orientation. We fill out some paperwork. I should also say that I do make an effort to have a phone conversation or an in-person meeting with every prospective volunteer. And that allows me to get a much better sense of what kind of match I should make for them. And that's both in terms of their partner garden friend and also the group of students that they will work with. So once the teacher, this all happens very much at the last minute, as you can imagine, because the teachers don't know their classes, but once the teacher gets the class list and has a sense of who they're working with, I meet with the teacher and they go through their class list, and I go away with their groupings and then try to match those groups of children with the volunteers. So it's not a precise science, it's more of an art form, but it's important that I try to get that right. So retention, how do I keep these lovely people happy? And there's Sarah wearing an apron, looking very happy. I think the garden friends always work in pairs as much as is possible. Sometimes there are absences to the extent that people might not have someone working with them for a morning, but that's very rare. So there's always that sense of support and adult companionship during the mornings that we're working with the students. Each pair of garden friends works with no more than 4 students, as I said, and that really is the ratio that creates the magic. It truly is. You know, that we just couldn't do the kind of in-depth learning that we do without that ratio. Volunteers meet a fair number of times over the course of a year, so they get to form relationships with each other, which is obviously quite rewarding for them, and many friendships have been formed that way. And then their knowledge and experience is something that I truly value and utilize and incorporate as much as I can. Like, why wouldn't I? You know, I have master gardeners and horticulturalists and experienced teachers and all kinds of people. So I really try to make the program such that they're able to bring their own style and experience and knowledge to work flexibly with their groups. And it's important to say that there's no sense in which I have designated activities and things we're trying to get through, but there's no sense in which they're expected to kind of cover curriculum or make sure they've checked off a certain topic, and certainly not kind of manage behavior. They're working side by side as much as possible with the students, and the class teacher is always there to deal with any of those other kinds of things. I also really like people, having been a volunteer myself, I know what it's like to turn up to something and not really know what it is you're supposed to be doing. So I'm really committed to making sure that detailed activity plans are provided in advance. And then on the day we have a brief actual pre-meeting, it should be in here, to go over what we'll be doing. And then also very brief, because I don't want everyone having to sit around in meetings all the time, but it's important that at the end of each session, we have a little get together so that people can debrief about anything that might have come up for them, or ask questions, or make suggestions that I can incorporate into next year's program or the next month's activity, whatever we're doing. I also like to spoil them as much as I can. So written into my budget is money to provide gift vouchers. I mean, there's no expectation from the volunteers of this, but you know, I like to write personal thank you cards. I usually print out cards at the end of the year that has a photo of volunteers, such as this one here, the volunteer working with the students. So I'll print out the photo and turn that into a card. We make aprons, etc. Plus they get obviously lots of love and appreciation from the students. We have some lunches. I do summer program activities, which I'll talk about in a second. And then the most important thing, the thing that keeps people coming back, is because of the nature and the structure of the program and the multiple opportunities for contact, those garden friends can see the impact on the kids that they're working with over the course of a full year, and that's pretty motivating. I'm not sure how I'm going for time. Tessa, Kaylin? Anyone?
Hi, Vanessa. Yeah, Vanessa, we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay, great.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, then I will skip over this, but these are some of the lovely things that people have said, but the photos kind of tell that story. But yeah, I should say actually about this, that these are direct quotes. I didn't make them up, and they come from a volunteer evaluation that I do, anonymous evaluation at the end of each year. So I send a quick survey, and ask a bunch of open-ended questions, and then people let me know. And it's very useful and information that I will incorporate into how I run the program the following year. Okay. So summer maintenance, which is something Tessa asked me specifically to talk about, and I feel apologetic that I can't really offer very much more than this. Because it's an ongoing challenge for me, honestly. You know, we had COVID for a couple of years. That meant I really was just focusing on keeping things going rather than kind of extending into summer. Last year was the first year that I was actually able to run kind of continued activities in the summer, which was fantastic. And I will expand that this year. But the kind of important things for me to say about summer maintenance in terms of blended learning is that I have worked hard to convince the board that if they want this kind of programming to happen, then they need to provide the infrastructure to support it. And that really does come down to irrigation. I mean, that's the number one thing, right? Like, I tried hand watering 6 or 5 gardens the first couple of years, and yeah, decided that wasn't happening. So we now have 4 of the 6 garden sites irrigated, and that is making a really big difference. And I'm hoping that all of them will be in the not too distant future. I run summer activities, as I said, as a continuation of the core program. So last year that was at the school that we did the core program in. I think there were 4 kind of art gardening based activities. The kind of hook is the arts and crafts, and then once kids are there with their parents don't have to be there, but sometimes parents join in. Then once we've done the kind of morning fun activity, then we can actually spend some time, as you can see in this photo, harvesting, eating the salad that is now growing beautifully, but there's no one at school to enjoy it. So we harvested like loads of peas, and, you know, I'll make a salad dressing. And so there'll be that kind of garden care and investment going on. I'd like to expand that. We'll see how my time goes. Yeah, currently I have no coordinated summer maintenance happening. So one of the ways I've tried to address that is to convene a garden educators network. So there's representative teachers from each school sitting on that. And I'm in the process of speaking with those people right now about how to support schools in creating maintenance programs that are relevant to them. You know, it's obviously not a cookie cutter thing. It depends on so many different factors. But ultimately, I'd like to have a consistent level of volunteer maintenance happening in each school over the summer. So we'll get there. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. That was a really rich overview of an incredible program, and a lot of suggestions about volunteer recruitment and retention that I think can be applied to summer volunteer programs, to year-long gardening programs, and some really transferable tips depending on what program individuals are running in their school. So thank you.
Thank you.
I know, Vanessa, you have to head off.
I do. I'm so sorry. I'd love to be here for the rest of it. It all looks so interesting, but I will look forward to watching the recording.
Wonderful. And I was going to remind folks on this call that there is this recording posted on our website. So if you'd like to look more at Vanessa's slideshow, you can see it in the recording, as well as links to her Facebook page and website as well for more information. And I'm going to pop our screen back onto a screen share, and we'll jump back into the rest of our slideshow. One moment. Just going to make this full size for us to see it better. Okay. Kaylin, can you confirm are you seeing speaker notes or just the speaker view? Okay, great. So for the rest of our presentation, we'll be looking at our summer maintenance plan and also engaging volunteers in our school garden over the course of the year as well as in the summer. But we want to start this conversation with thinking ahead to the fall, because so often our requirements around summer maintenance depend on what we vision, what are our goals for the garden in the fall. Before I get started on that, I'd love to ask you all, what are some of your favorite low maintenance fall crops for school gardens? So what are things you love to grow in your school garden that you find don't take much maintenance over the summer? Please share that in the chat bar. We'd love to hear from you about what you've experienced to really work out well for low maintenance summer crops. And while those are coming in, Kayla and I wanted to share our favorites. So for starters, one of my favorite low maintenance summer crops, fall crops to grow with kids is dried beans. They take very little maintenance over the summer, and in the fall, they are just one of the kids' favorite activities in the garden, like picking them, harvesting them, shelling them, opening up the pods and seeing what amazing colors are inside. And they work great for a harvest soup in late October. So that's one of my favorites. Kaylin, what's one of your favorites?
I was telling Tessa when we were planning this, I'm like a big squash nerd. And before I became a teacher, I worked like in the art world, and I just find squash so sculptural. I know that's like an aesthetic thing, but I love them. I think they're just like exciting every time they come out. And yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A few folks are sharing in the chat. I hear potatoes. They are pretty low maintenance. Thank you, Shauna. Yeah, and the joy of digging up potatoes. It's so neat to see, especially kids who have never done that before. I'm always amazed how clean they come out of the soil. So potatoes, and we have more kudos to dried beans. Totally, it's often not a crop for school gardens, but such a great one. Cinderella pumpkins, totally. Peas, always please, so true. Kohlrabi, that's another one we don't always grow in school gardens, and yet such a crunchy treat for a salad, and pretty quick growing too. And hardy, yes, totally. Keep popping those in the chat. It's always nice to see what folks out there are growing in their school gardens. So when we're thinking ahead to our gardens in the fall, one of our things we're thinking about is what time of year do we need to plant these things so that we can have our harvest aligned with the school year in the fall. So Farm to School BC has created a couple resources to help you with that element of crop planning. We have our crop planning calendars, and they're regionally specific. We have 3 across BC. So you can look at, if you're wanting to harvest when kids return to school in the fall, when do I need to plant these things? When do I need to transplant them, and how long are they going to be in the ground for? So that's a tool to help you plan for the fall and also let you know about what sort of summer maintenance you'll need. We also have our crop cards, which get into more details around how to plant things, the care they'll need, and how to harvest them. So Rowan's going to pop links to those in the chat bar. We'll also have them linked to on our program library, but those are great resources on our website to help you plan for the fall and help you manage your maintenance needs as well in the summer. So if you are thinking ahead to the fall and aware that you may not have a lot of maintenance opportunity in the summer, these are a few crops that I suggest for low maintenance, but still high reward in the fall. So growing winter squash, growing potatoes, growing dried beans, and also tomatillos are great opportunities for low maintenance crops that can all be thrown together in a pot of soup in October and make a really wonderful harvest meal. Tomatillos, some folks might not be familiar with them. They grow similar to tomatoes, but because they have this kind of exterior paper shell on them, they can stay on the ground for a couple of weeks before rotting. So they're a really good low maintenance thing, and they add an awesome kind of zesty zing to a soup. If you do have more opportunities for summer maintenance, some of the more typical summer crops, tomatoes, peppers, carrots, you can plan them to be harvestable in the fall, but they do require you to have some more maintenance in the summer. Another option for thinking of lower maintenance options is you can plan just a fall salad garden. So instead of maintaining crops through the summer in the school garden, you can let some of the garden beds go foul, and then the kind of mid-August, early September, you want to plant those garden beds out for a salad harvest at the end of October. September is a really busy time of year, and one kind of trick that I have done as a teacher is I actually start these at home at the end of August, and then I bring those transplants in mid-September. It's a great September activity to do in my class, insta reward by planting these seedlings that have already had a couple of weeks to get a head start. So if you are thinking about that, timing is really critical to ensure that the crops mature in time for a salad. Another great option for a low maintenance garden is to focus more on seed saving. So lots of crops that you've grown in the spring, if they're drying out through the summer, they will allow the opportunity to harvest seeds in the fall. The common ones we think of are peas and beans, really straightforward to save those seeds. Other things we might not think of are some of the greens like lettuce, arugula, and spinach. They will go to seed and you can save those seeds, as well as radishes. Tomatoes are a really fun one to save because you get to let them ferment and bubble before you clean off the tomato seeds. So lots of opportunity there, but each crop is specific. So you will want a few more details. Farm to School BC worked with farm folk, city folk to create crop cards for seed saving. And so Rand's going to put a link in the chat for that as well. But I recommend taking a look at that resource because you'll want a few more details around how you can make a productive seed saving garden. I have seen one school that does seed saving, packages up their seeds and uses that as a school fundraiser for their school garden. So some neat opportunities there too. One other thing to think about when you're crop planning is if you are having summer volunteers working in the garden, how can you crop plan such that you'll have some extra harvest for them? So perhaps that looks like planting more of your summer crops so they can harvest. Maybe you're leaving some garden beds empty for the garden volunteers in the summer to use. Or maybe you're planning for some perennials like ever-bearing raspberries, ever-bearing strawberries, so that there's some tasty snacks for summer volunteers to snack on. So thinking ahead about who's going to harvest and how that's going to look over the summer. We'll get more into that later on too. So that was a quick overview of thinking ahead to what does your garden look like in the fall? And now we're working backwards once we have that vision. Okay, what are the needs of that garden going to be over the summer? And the biggest need of all gardens, even these low maintenance gardens, is you're going to need some summer watering. And this is kind of the crux of the summer for school gardens is how do you provide that watering? We're going to get into some of the other summer maintenance in a bit, but I wanted to detail more specifically about watering because that's such a big challenge and so important for the summer garden. So when we're thinking about watering, there's kind of three main categories we're going to chat about. The first is access. Do you have access to water over the summer? This can be a challenge, and I'll tell a little story about that in a minute. You're also going to think about infrastructure. So what sort of infrastructure do I have to make watering easier? Do I have hoses, sprinklers, soaker hoses, irrigation, timers? And we'll look more at those specific infrastructure items. The last thing we're thinking about is how often do we need to water and what are some things we can do to decrease the need for frequent watering? So first, in terms of access, I share this photo in part because I love this school garden, but it's used an old school playground and converted it into a garden. So you can see the plants crawling up the old playground here. It's a really neat use of space. But I also share this picture because it reminds me of a story of a very seasoned gardener who was a teacher who ran the school garden and ran other school gardens as well. And even though she had ran gardens for years and years and years, a couple summers ago, the water was still shut off and her whole garden dried out. And she was so frustrated that she stopped doing school gardens. And so this is a common frustration that people have. And I just want to really stress that it's so important in the spring to understand how you'll have access to water over the summer. So that's for a conversation with an administrator. And you also want to make sure the administrator has had a conversation with facilities and maintenance, or maybe you've gone directly to facility and maintenance. Because we hear time and time again that you think you have access over the summer and then something happens and you no longer can bring your water into the garden. And it's so important for that garden that you've secured that access. So triple check on your summer water access. And there's always solutions to it. And there's lots of innovation in other districts of the ways they're making that access work. So if you're struggling with that, reach out to your local community animator and we can share some ideas. Next, on to watering infrastructure. One of the infrastructure pieces that will save you the most time is having a timer on your garden faucet. So it can be as simple as a timer in the middle that simply when you put a sprinkler on, you turn that dial and that sprinkler will run for 60 minutes or whatever you set it at. And that means that you can put a sprinkler on and walk away. The timer on the right is a battery operated timer where you can set the time that the water is going to go on and you can set how long it'll go on for. And you can set the days of the week that it goes on for. These are low cost items for huge time savings. So I really recommend if you can get a timer for your school garden, it can save you a lot of effort. If you do get a timer, use a splitter on your faucet so that you still have one hose that's an on-demand hose for washing hands or doing hand watering, and then use it on the other side of the splitter. Other common pieces of infrastructure for watering are sprinklers and soaker hoses. If you are using a sprinkler, just a reminder to get it up off the ground so you have better distribution of water over the garden. And then soaker hoses are awesome. They're relatively low barrier, low cost, and it's almost like you have irrigation. If you have a soaker hose on a timer, you're getting close. So that's another great low tech option. If you are able to have irrigation in your garden, you will be so thankful all summer long as that water is just, coming into your garden with little effort. I don't have time to get into the details of drip irrigation here, but I would like to say that these tube emitters, I find a lot more successful in school gardens than the flat drip tape. The tube emitters are much more durable. It's harder to spear them with a pitchfork. They emit pressurized water, so it's more even distribution of water. But they have a little bit at their higher cost, so a bit higher initial investment, but they're super easy to use. And I've seen them in school gardens for over 10 years, the same pieces of irrigation being used over and over again. So I really recommend that, and feel free to reach out to me with more questions about irrigation. The next thing about watering is thinking about water frequency and thinking about some of the things you can do to help decrease the frequency you need to water. So first of all, a deep watering is ideal. If you're not sure how deeply you're watering, after you've watered, dig in the soil and see how far the water's come down in the soil. You're looking for kind of 3 to 4 inches in water depth. The next thing in that is you'll want to figure out a bit more about your soil texture. A lot of school gardens have a lot of sand, which means they're really well drained, so they don't actually hold water like a clay soil would. But it's a great activity to do with a class. Do a texture test. Put some soil in a jar with water and a drop of soap, shake it up and let it settle. There's lots of lesson plans online for that, but it's a neat way of looking at what is the texture of my soil and how much water will be held. And it's a great little science experiment to do in your class. So it's really hard to give an average. Climate changes and soil type changes, but in general, you're looking at about 2 waterings per week in the summer. The last thing I want to say about frequency is just the magic of adding mulch to your garden. Mulch is good for so many things. I bring it up here because it can decrease the amount of water loss you have. It decreases evaporation from the soil. It holds that water into the soil. But it's also amazing because you have less weeds, you have more insect habitat, you have better soil fertility, and you regulate the soil temperature. It's also a really fun group activity to do in your garden is spreading mulch. Use what you have. Maybe you have leaves in the schoolyard, grass clippings from your neighbor. Maybe a parent brings in a whole bunch of straw. But find ways that you can bring mulch into your garden. Just simply laying that in a couple inches around your plants. And it'll not just decrease your watering, but it'll increase your overall garden fertility as well. So those are some specifics around summer water maintenance. And I'm going to pass it over to Kaylin. She's going to talk about engaging community volunteers in general in the garden, and then we're going to go back and look at engaging them specifically in the summer. So I'll hand it over to Kaylin.
Thanks, Tessa. I really loved hearing Vanessa's presentation, I think, because it showed what you could think about like over many years or like over a period of time. I think sometimes like the timescales at school feel like you have to do everything within that amount of time, like from September to June. But I think like something that I really enjoyed about what she was saying was like, oh, how can we stretch that timeline out? So when we're like doing things like building relationships, like that's not something that usually happens super fast. And if you can find a way to like make them long-term relationships, I think that can be really beneficial for that kind of continuity that we're all talking about, like continuity over the summer and then between years, especially when we all know that there's like shifting things, different people come in, sometimes people leave. And so I think I think with this topic just on a big scale is thinking about like how you could build that over time. So like building a program like Vanessa has done, it's not like an instantaneous thing either. I think it's good to remember. So these are some of the questions that I think about when I'm thinking about like, how are we engaging the community and like, how are we bringing people into the project that we're working on? So how are we including and inviting people into this work that we're doing? Thinking about like what your goals are for your garden community. Are we like focusing on, are we really wanting productive plants? Are we wanting to go through process? These are things that we've talked about in earlier presentations as well, but I think it's like always good to come back to that, thinking about like, what is it we're trying to do? Because it can kind of get lost when you get really busy in the garden. There's like a lot going on. I think even just like imagining how you want the community to participate. So is it like, because there's different sort of organizational structures as well. If you want people to be like really hands-on in that space, or maybe you're wanting to provide more guidance. And then these questions are really helpful for me too. It's like, what do you need help with? What are the tasks? Like what needs to get done and who is available to help you? And those things can really inform like, okay, like what is our capacity in this space? Like maybe we don't have that volunteer population built up yet. So that might dictate like, hey, what is it that we're able to do this year? Or maybe you've got like a really big group of volunteers, but your task list might be small. So it's like trying to figure out how you balance those things. Tessa, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is just kind of coming back to like that big scope question, like what kind of help do you need? And like Tessa said, and I think Vanessa also said, like water, irrigations, like that's something that's just, you're not gonna, it's a really important part of thinking about how you're gonna do that. Thinking about what your expectations for the summer and the fall are. So if you know, hey, like this is gonna end at the end of June, great. You know that, and maybe you start again in September, but yeah, understanding your expectations, thinking about things like weeding, monitoring for disease or insects, though Tessa and I talked about that, and we're saying I haven't encountered major, maybe this is just a luck and lack of, like, I just haven't had that experience in school gardens, but not as much disease and insects as I've seen like in a larger scale situation. But also thinking about things like what's going to happen with the food over those summer months. And then also thinking about like who's available as an emergency contact if people are not going to be in that space over that time. All right, next slide. So both, like Vanessa mentioned some of these groups. So thinking about like who do you already have in your community? Where is the knowledge and experience and energy that exists? Like you're kind of lucky when you're working with a school population in a way, because you sort of have this active audience already. And I think it was interesting that Vanessa was saying like a lot of their volunteers are not coming from that school population. So you might have a school population where maybe you have this knowledge already in that space, but it could be coming from out in the community. And I really liked the way she was saying like that those relationships between the students and people who are like non-parent, non-teaching adults who are present there are really beneficial and important confidence building relationships. So these are some ideas of like places that you might be able to seek out volunteers. Next slide. So this is just another thing about thinking about, I'm sort of doing large scope things about what we're thinking about, because there isn't like Vanessa was saying, it's not a one size fits all kind of thing, but just thinking about back to the presentation we did last time, thinking about signage and communication and about the ways that we might be communicating some of these things with people when we're not present all the time. So how can signage help make volunteer communications easier? Thinking about how you're building maybe guides or manuals that would be able to be used year to year. Like, what do we need to do and how does it need to be done? So being able to be explicit through that, through things like just printouts or a manual or a guide. Next slide, please, Tessa. So some other things to think about is like, how are we in sort of that recruitment area, or how are we drawing people into this work or letting them know that work that we're already doing, is thinking about things like the garden activity is happening. How are we inviting people into that space to know like, oh, this might be a possibility. So just thinking about things like parent-teacher conferences, assessment opportunities that you might be already working on in your classroom, student leadership requirements, your school newsletter or website, school assemblies, volunteer celebrations that might already be happening, those kinds of things, or school bulletin boards. So these are like structures that already exist that we might be able to use. Yeah. These are some nice pictures of just like different types of ways of inviting people in there. So sharing food, inviting people into celebrations. We'll talk more about that in our next workshop in June. One thing I was just going to brush on quickly, because I think I went a little bit over time, but just thinking about assessment and in the curriculum. So these are just ideas of thinking about like, hey, when we're thinking about how we're drawing in volunteers, thinking about like students who are already there who this falls directly within those core competencies that we're trying to work into our lesson plans and into the activity we're doing in our classrooms. So this stuff is on that BC curriculum guide, and just really thinking about ideas like working collectively, caring and contributing to your community. Anyway, thanks so much, Tessa. So I'm going to pass it over to Tessa to just talk a little bit more about summer volunteer coordination.
Okay, my apologies. Technical difficulties with the mute button. But here I am back. Thank you, Kaylin. Great way of engaging community in the school garden year round as well as in the summer. So now we're going to look specifically at, you have this group of volunteers. How are you coordinating them and managing them through the summer? Luckily, a lot of this information is put together in a resource on our website. We have our Farm to School BC School Garden Summer Maintenance resource. So head on over to our program library, and a lot of what I'm sharing with you today is there in more detail in this resource. So check that out. However you are organizing your volunteers in the summer, you will need some sort of task and schedule management, and lots of school gardens choose online options for that. So we wanted to share examples of either using a Google Doc or a Google Sheet as a way of both recording online the tasks that need happening, as well as providing a sign-up opportunity for people to sign up. This is a really low-tech, low-barrier way of being able to have a central place that people can sign up and also understand the activities that they're doing. If you're looking for a more kind of robust sign-up opportunity, there's also some websites that are made specifically for this task. So there's volunteersignup.org is a great website just for volunteer organizations looking at how you can coordinate sign-up tasks. Or there's signup.com, which is more robust and actually involves some calendar functions where you can organize groups of volunteers around tasks. So you can check those out if you're wanting to use kind of an online database, online tool for task and schedule organization. Regardless of what tool you're using, there's going to be different communication things you will like to consider. So we've talked about the online opportunities. Kaylin's talked about some of the things more in the garden or in the school, like maps and signages and message boards. Regardless of the mediums you're using, you're going to want to think about making sure you're sharing access details. So information around the lock and the key, perhaps it's a combo lock or there's a lock box on the outside of the garden. You're going to want to think about communication around tool access. How are people accessing tools in the shed? How are they putting them away? Are there enough tools for all the volunteers to use? And like Kaylin mentioned, thinking about emergency contact and around access details. So if there's any challenges with access, that there's a number that people can reach out to. As well, you'll want to be communicating a comprehensive description of the tasks that need doing, how they need doing, in addition to any of the watering tasks that will also need to be described. And then lastly, you want to be clear on expectations around harvesting. So this is something you'll go over with the volunteers to make sure that they understand and you understand what their expectations are around harvesting. You want your vision for the garden in the fall, you want to return to the fall and be able to still have that harvest there for the students, as well as have volunteers feel appreciated and included in the garden in the summer. So there's several different maintenance models that different school gardens use. These aren't exclusive. Some gardens mix and match and use different models together. And so I'm just going to overview a few of the different opportunities for maintenance models. So first really common one is the weekly caretaker sign up, where a parent or a teacher or a family signs up for the week and provides the maintenance for the garden for that week, including watering and any other tasks that they have. Another option are work parties, where groups come together, usually supported by a garden coordinator or some sort of knowledgeable garden person, and they host a work party, perhaps around a specific task or just general watering and weeding maintenance. Another maintenance model is having a community garden plot within your school garden. So you could have community garden members that have a plot in your garden, and in reciprocity for their garden space, they're also maintaining the school garden over the summer. Another option is to partner with local organizations, and I'm going to go into that one in more detail because there's some neat opportunities here. So we have seen school gardens that either partner with a local nonprofit or partner with a community organization near them, a senior center, or a childcare center. Some community schools are great that they have a childcare center right in the school environment. And so an easy access to the garden can provide rich learning for the students in the summer in the childcare center, as well as maintenance opportunity for the garden. And also an opportunity to partner with master gardeners. And in a minute, Rose is going to talk more about what that can look like in one specific context. There's also an opportunity to connect with summer programming that the school district might put on, especially districts that have community school coordinators. There's lots of opportunities to connect with a community school coordinator and see how you can incorporate the garden into already existing summer programming. And one other partnership I want to mention is some school gardens have partnered with a nonprofit, and through the Canada Summer Jobs Program, that nonprofit has been able to hire students to be able to maintain the gardens in the summer. There's lots of details around that one, and it's a really neat model. And so there's a specific Farm to School resource that Ro's going to pop into the chat that just outlines that sort of partnership, an example in Vancouver and how they've done that to maintain the school gardens in Vancouver. So a really neat partnership. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Regardless of how you're engaging volunteers in the summer, you will want to think about how can we appreciate them. I really love what Vanessa said about volunteers seeing the impact on the kids and how valuable that is. And so it makes me think a bit about summer volunteers. How do you also help them see the impact they're having by maintaining that school garden in the summer? But other things you can do is provide extra food for the volunteers to harvest, provide space in the garden for the volunteers, provide educational opportunities. So perhaps you're running a work party on tomato pruning. That's a chance for people also learn more about tomatoes and how to prune them and how to care for them in the summer. You can also show appreciation through cards, through social media recognition, through garden themed gifts, like making a dried tea in the fall from all the herbs in the garden to then give back to volunteers. And an appreciation garden party is always a wonderful way to bring community together and show appreciation as well. So to look more closely at a specific partnership, I'm going to pass it over to Ro. Roanne is the North Central Community Animator with Farm to School BC, and she's doing a really interesting partnership this year for a school garden up in the north. So Ro, I'll pass it over to you and just let me know how I can move the slides.
Yeah, thanks, Tessa. Thanks for having me join you today. And yeah, like Tessa mentioned, I am an animator here with Farm to School BC, but I just went through the Master Gardener program. So I think I'm now in a Master Gardener in training here in Prince George. And through that, yeah, there's so many opportunities that could be tapped into for summer maintenance. So here I just have a list of the provincial Master Gardener programs that exist throughout the province. And I will share now, I just shared a link to the provincial website. And if you go to there, they have links to go to the separate websites there for where you may be. But even if, and I don't really know how far these separate groups of the province really extend, but yeah, I would recommend connecting to them because they may be aware of other more informal groups that exist that might be in your community that they're still connected to. Yeah, you could probably go to the next slide here. So one of the great things about connecting with the Master Gardener program is that Master Gardeners have volunteer hours every year that they have to fulfill in their communities. And I think many of them just want to fulfill those hours and many more. I think the minimum is like 15 hours a year. And if you're a student like myself, I think it's like 100 hours over 18 months or something. So there's a lot of potential there to connect in. And then even beyond that, I think Master Gardeners within the program, they have their own like extended networks within the communities, right? Because a lot of them have their own gardens and those connections there. So whether it's directly connecting, reaching out to the program to see if some of those volunteer hours could be connected to your school is a great way. But even beyond that, like they have their own existing networks. So they might know of someone else they know in their neighborhood that would really like to connect and help out with your school garden. So even using the Master Gardeners as an extension to connect out to other people in the communities. Master Gardener programs, they also hold within like their mandate of how they want to support, they all list like supporting school gardens, and whether that can also be for coming into the school garden for like mentorship lessons, workshops. Master Gardeners also host a lot of garden tours and workshops. So maybe a garden tour could be your school garden that they host a garden tour in. Maybe they could run a workshop there that could bring the community to your school to see your community garden. So maybe that could be a way that you can position to gain more, like let people see your garden and maybe get interest in people wanting to support for the summer maintenance piece. They also have like CD Saturdays, like a lot of Master Gardener programs host CD Saturdays. So maybe connecting with them to have a table for your school to get volunteers could be a potential. So I just think connecting with them and seeing where those opportunities may exist to kind of connect out and spread the word. And another thing that our specific in Prince George, they started a seed library here with our Prince George Public Library. So another neat way to connect that is getting some of those seeds from the seed library to plant out in your school, and maybe there'll be master gardeners that are part of that specific project, for an example, that'll come and try to like mentor that component. So maybe that could also shift into some of that support during the summer. And next slide. So this is just a specific example. So wearing my Master Gardener training hat, this is myself and Shweta, who is also in the program with me. And this is a community school here in Prince George. And they've had a garden for many years, but it's been one key educator that's kind of kept it going. But she's getting to the point where she wants to retire and she wants to just not have the responsibility anymore. So it was also getting to the point where garden beds were being planted out with something that like bulbs are things that maybe they would enjoy just in the spring and then not really have anything extend beyond, just because they didn't have that capacity. So with Shweta and I coming in to support with watering and some other maintenance over the summer, now we're helping with the garden plan, and we're going to have all kinds of fun things that would require a bit more maintenance, so we can tend to those things like cucumbers that you have to keep harvesting for the plant to keep producing, and all those fun things. And like was mentioned earlier in our relationship here, it's going to be where Shweta can harvest those things that are harvestable during that time, because she lives in a place without a yard, so it's kind of that win-win there. So we're really excited. So we're helping with the crop planting. We're going to go help with the planting activity, and then we'll go back in the fall and help with some post-harvest activities as well. And I'll quickly speak to one more slide because I see we only the other thing I just want to mention is Prince George, for example, and I think other this might exist in other groups throughout the province, but they're working to set up a junior master gardener program in one of our high schools actually. And so the opportunity for the Junior Master Gardener program could be, there's conversations around with the district level creating like those student summer job positions that the students within these programs could maybe do that summer job opportunities, and just connecting them out to more of the community as well to develop those relationships for the school. So yeah, lots of opportunity if you reach out to your Master Gardener groups.
Thank you so much, Rowan. There's so much in this topic. It's like, because it's hard to just talk about only summer or summer maintenance, but it's really nice to hear like the example of how you're working and understand sort of what that program is and how supportive that could be. I think it can be like a really great starting place too, and really nice to hear Vanessa shared too, those things in relationship. So thank you all for joining us. So next, our discussion group next week actually falls on the same dates as a conference that Farm to School BC will be hosting on the 18th and 19th. So we will be combining our topic that was meant for next week with our June 15th discussion group. So if you are interested in joining us for a discussion group, the May one will be postponed and partnered with the June 15th one. And that will be looking at summer maintenance, volunteer management, and the spring harvest celebrations and summer preparations. So I hope you can join us. Our next workshop is going to be on June 6th. And it will be looking at spring harvest and celebration. And I think we will be having another guest speaker join us, which is really great. It's always great to hear examples of how people are doing stuff like out in the world. That's less of an abstract idea and more thinking about like how people are really doing it in different situations. I know I'm learning a lot from it as well. And like I mentioned, we have this conference coming up, the Farm to School BC conference on May 18th and 19th at UBC. So if you're interested in that program, you can follow that link there. And as always, please feel free to reach out to me, Tessa, or any of the animators This is like a really big topic, and I think it can be one that's really helpful to be talking about in discussion or talking about with examples. We gave you a lot of information today, so please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, or come back and join us on June 15th for the discussion group. Great. Thank you all for joining us today.